Welcome everyone, this is George Gell, and we're with another video of Fate Grand Order. Now this video we're not actually going to talk about any servant specifically, at least not in a more analytical sense. I'll be mentioning some servants here and there, but they're going to be for another purpose. What I will be talking more about will be singularities. That's right, in this video I'll be talking about which singularities I would change the most. First of all, we'll only be talking about singularities here. So lost belts, they don't count, and special events also don't count. So only story singularities count. That means the first 7 singularities and also the Epic of Remnant singularities, which are 4 of them, right? So, also, this will be done raw. What I mean by that is, I'm not doing a script here, I'm speaking as my brain is processing the information. This way you can see, or hear in this case, my actual feelings and opinions towards specific singularities were aimed completely raw and unfiltered. Well, future me will edit this to remove any kind of swearing because YouTube will shadow censor my video if I swear on it. That's something I've realized very quickly now, that I've finally realized. But anyway, let's go on with the video about the singularities. So first off, let's look at the singularities I wouldn't change, right? So F singularity, the first singularity, I wouldn't change it. It's the tutorial area. It works pretty well for a tutorial area. I don't have any problems with it. It's perfectly fine. Orleans, also I don't have any issue with. It's very basic, but it's fine because it's technically the actual first singularity you deal with that's not a tutorial one. So it works as an introductory level for what to expect in the future of singularities. Okeanos, I also wouldn't change. I find it quite funny. I liked it. No issues whatsoever. America is fine. Nothing too impressive, but it didn't have much that I found negative. So America, singularity would also be pretty fine for me. Obviously Camelot and Babylon don't even need to be mentioned. These are amazing. They don't need to be changed. Temple of Time was also pretty good as a conclusion. I wouldn't change anything. Now, on the Epic of Remnants. Shinjuku, pretty good singularity. I wouldn't change it. In fact, it's my favorite singularity of Epic Remnant. And of course, we have Shimusa, which I also wouldn't change. The Japanese theme and all the combat and the dueling was pretty fun. Even if it was a bit repetitive until towards the end. But I wouldn't change those. That leaves 4 singularities. So, let's start from the ones I would change the least to the ones I would change the most. Now, the one that I would change the least would probably be London. Now, London singularity has a big issue, and that is the ending. So, throughout the London singularity, I wouldn't change much of it. I think London singularity is actually quite good. Well, not good, but you know, it's decent enough, right? It's not amazing, but it works. The big issue is the ending. The whole trope of the "but wait, there's another boss now" is so just it just made the entire ending just feel bad. Even with Solomon showing up, it just felt like, come on man, enough with these "here's the final boss" moment. Tesla did not need to show up. Okay, first of all, let's start with that. Tesla did not need to show up. Tesla shows up in the next singularity in America, so Tesla did not need to show up in London. Not only that, the Lancer Arturia altar showing up was just like, what even was that? She had literally no dialogue. She just shows up, we kill her, and she's gone. Wow! Amazing, impressive. I am so amazed by this boss. I would do it again. Made no sense. And you could actually very easily improve this by just removing Tesla and having the servant that Zokan summons being Arturia, which would make sense that she would be summoned as an altar since she would be afflicted by the mad enhancement that was inflicting Tesla. And you could add all kinds of dialogue there with her and Mordred and whatever. So just that change alone would have made the ending at least much better. Solomon showing up, I don't have an issue. It's the Tesla into... No, it's the Demon God Pillar into Tesla into Lancer Arturia Altar, which didn't even have dialogues, into Solomon. It's these 4 bosses, one after another, for no apparent reason other than here's another boss, that really made London feel its ending to be just really a disappointment. So, in my opinion, I would keep the Demon Lord, I would remove the Tesla, I would change the servant that Zokan summons to be Arturia instead of Tesla, and we'd go from Arturia straight to Solomon. So that's the change I would do to London. It's not too much, it's just the ending, because overall I do think the London Singularity was fine. It's just the ending that really made it kind of a stinker. Next Singularity I would change the least is Salem. Salem is a weird one because I'm not actually sure what I would change. And the reason for it is because Salem I think the biggest problem Salem had was its promise. I remember when Salem was first announced, there was a lot of hype because the announcement was like, oh, it's Lovecraftian horror, it's Salem, the madness, and all that. But while I think most people can agree that Salem does have this kind of, dark and gritty theme to it, there's a lot of issues with it when it comes to the actual Lovecraft, and even to the witch trials. First of all, there's actually very little impact that the executions did. The hangings actually had very little impact. Aside from Sansom, none of the other ones that were hanged were actually hanged. I mean, sure, Sheba does show up as a corpse, so we think that she's dead, but I mean, she shows up right afterwards, so I guess that death had no impact. Matahari also technically didn't die, so it's like, there was a lot of issues with that. Like, the death didn't make much sense. Like, the hangings had this very big impact and all this, like, even own animation. But then when you actually see what happened in the story didn't change much. They just continued as if the characters exist because the characters did not die. Also, I think that the story, Salem did a boo-boo by having Sheba showing up in her sprite. What was the name? Tituba, I think that was the name. Like, why is it not difficult to just make a simple sprite with just medieval clothes? Just having Sheba show up out of nowhere and us being like, oh yes, this is Tituba. This is not some other servant that is clearly going to be summonable. That whole part was kind of like difficult to digest. I mean, and it's actually interesting because if you look at the manga that's adapting the Salem Singularity, like in there, Tituba actually looks like a normal person. Like, you wouldn't look at her and be like, oh yeah, this is Queen of Sheba or whatever servant you might think she might be. Like, this is an actual human being. So it really shows that how much of a difference having the same sprite kind of causes, right? Because we already know that she's not actually going to die. She's going to show up later. She's going to be an important figure, especially when there's that whole spoiler, where they're doing the whole Queen Sheba meeting Solomon theater act. It's like that's a big rub in the face of Here's who she actually is. By the way, she's gonna die. And it's like, she's not gonna die. And she didn't die. So, yeah, that was... Salem had a lot of issues in that particularity. Like, if you want to look at true horror, I think even Saraf does a better job at it, just with how Demon God Pillar behaved with Kiara. I think that even has more horror to it than whatever Salem tried to do. And I think that's most of the complaints I have with Salem. There's a lot of there's a lack of impact. And because there's a lack of impact, there's also a lack of just horror in general. Not to mention, the Singularity ended on a very bright note. Right? It didn't end in like a very sad reality or desperate situation, which is more common from horror, from Lovecraftian horror. It ended in a very just light moment of just hope and brilliance. And for me, and that kind of didn't work. I still like Salem in general, but I definitely disliked a lot of part of it. And there were certain moments where I was very frustrated with certain characters and how they were behaving. But that's I'm not sure what I would change from Salem. Maybe I would make it a bit more gritty and with a lot more impact, like servants. Like Matahari should have died. Queen Ashiba should have had her own sprite as Tituba and should have died. And a whole bunch of other characters should have had a bit more impact. Also, the ending was a bit too much on the nose of, wow, it's a good ending, yay. But whatever. Next, Singularity, Agartha. Oh boy. I don't even know where to start with this one. And it's not even the worst one. Oh my god, I don't even want to start with the worst one. So we're gonna delay it as much with Agartha. Man, what I would even change with Agartha. Agartha has so many problems. Oh god. First of all, Astolfo was the worst pick you could ever do for a main character. Astolfo does not work as a main character. You cannot have Astolfo as a main character. Because Astolfo, as much as people like Astolfo has a big problem. And that is that he's a comedy. He's comedic by definition. His own description and personality makes him comedic by definition. And so when you plop him in a story, whenever he shows up in a scene, it is going to, by default, make that scene ridiculous. So you could literally have one of the most depressing scenes possible imaginable. Like, I'm just imagining right now Sakura in the worm pit in the Makuri house, right, in the Mato house, and just plop an Astolfo there, and somehow the entire scene is gonna go from depressive to just laughable because Astolfo is there. And that's the big problem with Astolfo. You cannot put him as a main character, because if you make him a main character, then all the story has to focus on Astolfo. And because you're focusing this primarily on Astolfo and other characters, then the entire story is going to feel extremely lighthearted. And that's the big problem that Agartha had, in my opinion. Many of the scenes just felt off because random comment of Astolfo that just destroys the entire tension. And that's kind of the problem. Astolfo should have not be picked. Dion was fine. Dion was actually one of the better characters in Agartha. Like, by far, Dion was very good. But Astolfo was just the wrong pick. A very bad pick. And in general, Astolfo doesn't even, like, contribute that much, aside from being a trap. Because, I guess, like, Astolfo was just very weird. Also, Hector Lily, where do I even start with him? Like, I don't actually have that much of a problem with him being all, oh no, I can't fight women. First of all, he's from a different era. He's also very young. It's completely expected that would be his thought process. And as the story progressed, he did change that behavior because he changed his mentality because it makes sense. He's fighting a lot of female opponents, so as he's facing them constantly, his mentality of, oh no, I can't fight a woman, would change into, it's not a problem to fight a woman. That for me is not the problem. The biggest problem I had with Hector Lily is the ending. Like that whole speech for Shirazad is just so cringe. Oh my god, I don't know what they were thinking about doing that. Oh my god, I'm just remembering is making me cringe. Oh my god, that was such a bad one. That entire scene was just bad. I mean, it's funny, you know. That's kind of the problem with Agrafah. There's a lot of heavy topics. There's a lot of intense moments. There's actually, like, Shehrazad's fear is actually quite understandable. Like, it's if you actually put a lot of thought process into what she's saying and what she's concluding and what she's truly doing and why she's doing it, it actually makes for a very intense scene and a very depressing moment. But all of it is just made light of because you have Astolfo and Hector Lily going off in their tangents. And it's like, oh my god, just shut up, you two. You're ruining the entire story. And that's my problem with Agrafah. Astolfo, horrible pick. You cannot have Astolfo as the main character in a story. Astolfo has to be a side character that occasionally is brought into the screen so that he lightens the mood. You can't have him permanently on screen because then the mood is always lightened, because Astolfo lightens every mood. And Hector Lily, I get what they were going for, but that entire ending speech was just bad. And that alone for me, just no. And to be honest, I think just changing Astolfo to a different character and changing the speech that Hector Lily gave would be enough to make Agrafah passable. And I know some people might think that there's a lot more that needs fixing, but I think just these two would be enough to change, to make a difference. Because Astolfo disappearing and being changed by an actual serious character would make the Agrafah feel a lot more intense and serious. Like the scenes that were being done, like what the pirates were doing, what the Chinese city was doing, what the Amazons were doing, all of what they were doing was horrible. But like, if I'm trying to remember Agrafah, all I can think of is Astolfo. All I can think of is just Astolfo saying weird stuff and going on tangents and just making no sense. And that's kind of my experience with Agrafah. There was that entire cast decision was bad. Right? Astolfo should have not been picked. Dion was fine. Columbus was fine. Hercules was fine. Also, I guess I'm not going to complain too much about you. You didn't really ruin Agrafah for me, but I had to have an issue with your character. Anyway, that was Agrafah. And now, oh boy, on to the last singularity I would change. The Roman one. You know the one. The Nero one. The one that nobody likes. I don't even know what I would change in this one. Because I think this Roman Singularity just needs to be scrapped and remade from scratch. Because the entire story just doesn't make any sense. Romans fighting against Romans. I mean, that did happen in the past. There was the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire, and they actually did butt heads a lot of times. But that's not actually what happened, right? The whole Roman emperors fighting against Roman emperors felt a bit weird why they would go against Nero, never really explained. Boudicca and Spartacus, like, I don't know who thought this would be a good idea. Like, who thought it would be a good idea to have Boudicca and Spartacus fighting alongside the Romans? That doesn't make any sense, especially Boudicca, considering Nero was the ruler when Boudica's entire life was destroyed. I was like it doesn't make any sense. And I'm not the only one who thinks this. I'm pretty sure this is the biggest complaint people have, which is, why is Boudica fighting alongside Nero? That doesn't make any sense. Boudica would have just gone completely bananas and killed Nero on the spot. But apparently, whoever thought it was a good idea did it. And I mean, Altera shows up at the end for reasons I don't even understand. Like the many of the Roman generals or enemies that we fought was just kind of like, okay, I guess you're the enemy. I mean, I don't really feel that threatened by you. The whole traveling to the island where you have one of Medusa's sisters, and I think there's another one there. I don't remember who was the other servant that showed up there, which didn't really have like. You literally didn't need that. There was no point to that other than here's more characters we have to introduce, which is an issue that a lot of the earlier Singularities had, right? They don't really care that much about story. They're just like, I have X amount of servants I have to insert into this story because I have a quarter to fill, and that's what many of the early Singularities have, and that's why the amount of servants in them in the early ones is so high. But man, what would I change in that one? Well, first of all, obviously Boudica and Spartacus are not on the Roman. They're not allies with Roman. I would scrap the entire idea of Romans fighting Romans, and to be honest, I just make a straightforward. Here's every enemy that the Roman Empire basically had invading Rome altogether. So just have Spartacus, you have Altera, you have Boudica, you have whoever. I can't even remember. Do we have more? I can't remember on the top of my head. There's probably more out there. And if there aren't, just make them instead of making other characters. And just have like this big invasion of just, heck, even to make it even spicier, make Boudica an Avenger, like 5-star Avenger, who's just leading the charge with all these other enemies of Rome, and all she wants to do is just trample and destroy Rome. There you go. You have a perfect, very simple, very believable story with the Roman Empire. But they went for whatever that was. Didn't make any sense. Nobody likes it. So, yeah. And anyway, that was my opinions on the Singularities. I actually think most of the Singularities are actually quite good. It's just that those four, in my opinion, were just kind of, they had their issues. Especially the last two. The last two had way too many issues. And I think most people would agree that they do need a rework for that. Especially the Roman one. Agatha, I can kind of just ignore it, but the Roman one really needs a rework. That Singularity is just a mess. But anyway, thank you for watching and hearing me rant over Singularities. And hey, share down below what is your favorite and which Singularities you hate the most. I think most people agree that their favorite Singularities are Babylon and Camelot. I mean, that's pretty within point. I also like Shinjuku from the Epic of Remnant, so I'm not that different from the norm. And I mean, it makes sense because those Singularities are by far higher in quality. But anyway, thank you for watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy my content, and leave a comment down below. Till next time, bye.